Hey, thanks for checking out this episode of the Screen Facts with Jason Davis podcast. In each episode, we talk about a movie, we share some fun trivia facts. You can check out the latest episode of the podcast on Wednesdays. Please like us at facebook.com/screenfacts and post your comments or questions. You can also email us, screenfacts@yahoo.com, or send me a tweet at Jason Davis Voice. To access past episodes, please visit jasondavisvoice.com/podcast. And now that we've gotten that out of the way, I'm happy to welcome back to the show my good pal, one of the most influential people in my life that I can think of, the one and only Les Sinclair. Hello, sir.
Hello, sir, and thank you very much. That's very kind of you.
I'm actually getting better at this because usually when we do the podcast, I'll do an hour-long intro of you talking about how much you mean to me and the impact you've had on my life. So that
I'm glad you didn't do that this time.
Yeah, because, you're probably tired of hearing it, right?
Well, I have heard it. And I do appreciate it. I mean, that's not the thing. I don't know what to say about it. I'm blushing, so there it is. I appreciate you, too. You're a magnificent human being.
Oh, stop.
Love Fest continues.
Yes, indeed. So, Les, you and I are going to talk about a sort of more recent movie, although it's almost 10 years old, which is amazing to me.
Incredible.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's that old, this movie. But we're going to discuss The Dark Knight. And before we get started and talk about The Dark Knight, I think we would be remiss if we didn't mention the recent passing of Adam West, the original film or TV Batman. I say film, obviously he was the TV Batman, but he was the first, I guess, live-action Batman. That's what I was trying to say.
They shot TV on film back then.
Yes, they did. But I don't want people going, "It was on TV, you moron."
It was also in full color, which was unusual for a show in the 1960s.
That's right. I remember the opening sequence, Batman in color. And there was a film version of Batman, too, with him.
Is that true?
Well, I don't know if it was theatrically released. I believe it was, maybe it was the pilot. Mm-hmm. I have a Blu-ray it's like a standalone movie, hour and a half, whatever, of basically the Batman TV show in like a movie.
Was it as campy as the TV show?
Hell yeah. Yeah, it was like, the bat shark repellent, that kind of stuff. It was silly, like the show. But
yeah. Listen,
you and I are about the same age, young enough where we didn't see the original Batman show when it first aired. I don't know about you, but I definitely grew up watching the reruns of this. For me, it was Channel 11 WPIX in New York in syndication.
Yeah, it was a great TV show, honestly. Yeah, it was very fundamental as a child, I think. Yeah, it was fantastic. And into my teens, as a matter of fact, because the thing was in reruns all the time. And, you'd catch it and watch it, and it meant different things. I think when we were little kids, it was the hero, even though it was campy. And then as you get to be a teenager, it just becomes more campy. And then you get to be an adult, and you start to appreciate the campiness of it.
Yeah, absolutely. But Julie Newmar as Catwoman.
Oh, yeah, right. All the Catwomen were awesome. They were just awesome. Catwomen were fantastic.
Oh, absolutely. I remember watching the show and like you said, not really even recognizing the campiness. It was just cool. It was Batman, it was Robin, it was the whole thing. And then when the 1989 Batman movie came out with Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson, Tim Burton did sort of a darker play on it, and it was kind of different. And then Christopher Nolan does his Batman series, and it makes Tim Burton's movie look campy.
Most of the women that I talk to really like the original Batman movies, Tim Burton's, even through George Clooney. The women seem to be drawn to those.
Interesting.
I always thought they were kind of cartoonish.
Yes.
And when I had the discussion, I was just talking about that this weekend with my morning show host, Sherry Taylor, because I was telling her I was going to be on this podcast. We were talking about this movie.
Okay.
And she was saying how much she liked the originals. And my wife also likes them a lot. And there are other women that I've talked to. And I don't know what it is, but for me, I like the grittier version because it's more like the comic book.
Yeah, I was never a comic book reader, and I didn't really know much about the character and how he is a very dark character. Yeah. And that was sort of explored a little bit in Tim Burton's version, but definitely in these Christopher Nolan films, he takes it to the whole different level. And one other thing I wanted to mention, The Dark Knight is a sequel, and this is the first time on the podcast that you and I, or me and anybody else, is talking about a sequel without talking about the original movie, which I think is kind of interesting.
I think where you're leading is that this is such a impactful movie. I mean, it won Academy Awards.
Yeah, and as far as I'm concerned, this is not only the best Batman movie, arguably this is one of the best superhero movies ever made, in my opinion. opinion.
It was the first superhero movie to make $1 billion.
Yeah, we'll talk about all the numbers in just a little bit. This made a shitload of money. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty amazing. So The Dark Knight, released July 18th, 2008, stars Christian Bale, Heath Ledger, and we're going to have a lot to talk about with him coming up. Aaron Eckhart, who I think is a very underrated actor, terrific.
Yes.
Michael Caine, Maggie Gyllenhaal, Gary Oldman, and Morgan Freeman. Directed by Christopher Nolan, screenplay written by Jonathan and Christopher Nolan, story by Christopher Nolan and David S. Goyer, based on characters by Bob Kane. Estimated budget $185 million, domestic gross $535 million. Worldwide, as Les just mentioned, $1.4 billion.
Yeah.
The number 1 Batman movie, the number 2 comic book movie behind The Avengers, and number 6 on the list of all-time highest domestic grossing films behind Marvel's The Avengers, Jurassic World, Titanic, Avatar, and Star Wars The Force Awakens, numbers 5 through 1 respectively.
I must weigh in on this, though.
Okay.
Because as superhero movies go, The Avengers is not fair. Because The Avengers is relying on the star power of like 6 different superheroes and 6 different stars. This movie is just Batman.
Well, I think a lot of the success of this movie honestly has to do with Heath Ledger. Not taking anything away from Christian Bale or the character of Batman, obviously. But, I mean, one of the things I noticed on the Blu-ray is that on the cover, it's a picture of Heath Ledger. Which I think is very interesting. You know, when you're talking about the title character is not pictured on the cover. So
I wonder if a lot of that, though, isn't marketing because he passed away after this film, and they really capitalized on that. And I think Heath Ledger was capitalized on that, too. I mean, this was his final movie. That's a big deal.
Yeah, but I think Heath Ledger is what makes this movie great for me. And I would have felt that way even if he didn't die. I mean, it's obviously tragic that he passed away after making this movie, but his performance in this film is fantastic. And it's the reason I want to keep coming back to watch it, and certainly was worthy of all the accolades that he received posthumously.
You know, I think the first time I saw this movie, I did not feel that way. I don't know what all the fuss is about, but as I've seen it several times and just watching it again last night, the licking of the lips, the tics that he has for this character are just so nuanced and just beautifully done.
Yeah. There was a show on recently on, I want to say it was TNT, called I Am Heath Ledger. It was actually very interesting. It was a lot of his old friends from Australia and other actors and stuff, and they were basically talking about what his life was like. And intertwined in that were like home movies that he shot, because he was a very creative guy. And that's what a lot of people may not realize about Heath Ledger. Aside from being a terrific actor, the guy was really, really talented as an artist, as a photographer. I think if he were alive now, he probably would be a great director as well. In fact, in the movie, there's a couple of things that the Joker sends to the news organization in the movie, where he's, tormenting the guy dressed as Batman in one, and then the other one he's got Anthony Michael Hall as a hostage.
They're glorified home movies, essentially.
Right, but those were actually directed by Heath Ledger for the movie. Christopher Nolan let him direct those himself, and they're pretty cool. But I mean, he directed a music video and some other stuff before he passed away. I think he would have gone on to be a very popular and talented director as well. But this show that I was talking about, his friend was describing, when Heath told him that he was offered the role of Joker, he's like, "Oh, really? I don't know, man. Jack Nicholson was pretty great in and when Tim Burton did Batman. You want to follow that?" And he goes, "How are you going to do it?" Heath Ledger goes, "You want to know how I got these scars?" And he did the voice, and his friend was like, "Oh my God!" He was flipping out. He said, Heath just really went all out preparing for the role, coming up with his own version of the character.
I was reading online that Christopher Nolan had plans for Heath Ledger in the third movie, but that, of course, didn't pan out.
Right. It's interesting. I thought Batman Begins was pretty good, too, the first of the 3 Christopher Nolan Dark Knight movies.
Yes.
This is by far the best one, and hence why we're talking about it. And I thought the last one obviously had moments that were really good. Maybe I have to watch it again, but I felt it was a little disjointed at times.
The third one?
Yeah.
It was a different set, there's no doubt about it. But I was reading about how Christopher Nolan had like a one-word theme for each movie. Like the first one was fear, the second one was chaos, the one with Heath Ledger, and then the third one was pain, which is pain for Batman. So it was fear of Batman, then it was chaos for Batman, then it was pain for Batman. So different themes playing through each of the films, and I think, boy, this one, chaos certainly was captured.
Oh, absolutely. I think my problem with the third movie is that anytime you have a superhero movie where there's more than one villain going on, that tends to make things a little, I don't want to say confusing, but too much going on maybe. And it's happened before with the Spider-Man series. So and that maybe that's the problem. But maybe I just need to watch it again and maybe I'll appreciate it more watching it another time. The problem with these movies is that they're really long. So it's a real time commitment. You know, as my wife would call them, an ass flattener. You know, this movie runs like, 2.5 hours or whatever it is. You're definitely in for a long haul if you're going to watch one of these movies. But they're very well done, no question.
Yeah, one of the things I like about each of the Batman movies is that the villain always plays the henchman. In the opening sequence of this movie, we don't know who the Joker is, but he's just one of the guys robbing the bank.
Yeah.
Then he ends up being the Joker.
Yeah.
And they did the same thing in each of the movies, so that was an interesting way to introduce the villain.
Yeah. So Heath Ledger posthumously won a total of 32 Best Supporting Actor awards, including the Oscar, Golden Globe, SAG, and Critics' Choice Award. The movie also won an Oscar, as you mentioned before, for Best Sound Editing, and was nominated for cinematography, film editing, art direction, makeup, sound mixing, and visual effects. It's the comic book film with the most Oscar nominations, and I think it was because of this movie that they introduced 10 Best Picture nominations the next year and then going forward, because it used to be just 5, I think, or something like that.
Right. Uh-huh.
And because this movie and there was another movie that was really well received that didn't get any nominations, the Academy said, you know what, maybe we need to open this up a little bit more so there's more possibilities. Now, I don't know if a comic book movie could ever win Best Picture, because I think a lot of people just don't take them seriously enough. But, I mean, you think about the work and the dedication and everything else that goes into making these movies, I think they're worthy.
Well, I think any movie that is put out there, especially one that makes such a tremendous amount of money, I know that the Academy Awards aren't based on box office.
Right.
But the reality is, and I think you and I have talked about this before, Matt Damon says that they should give out Oscars 10 years after the movie has been out to see if it has legs. You know, if it can stand the test of time, then it was a good movie. And this one certainly does that.
Yeah.
10 years later, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's a very good point, because there's a lot of movies that fail at the box office or fail with critics that I've enjoyed and that have found an audience later on, you know, because of either cable or video or whatever, that sometimes for whatever reason they just don't find an audience when they're in theaters. Timing, whatever it is. This one is both. I think it obviously crushed at the theater, but I think it's done well in every other format as well. And like you said, it stands the test of time.
And it's a real roller coaster ride, too. Mm-hmm. Watching it again last night, it's almost like you start off on a roller coaster and it go up and down, but each time you go up and down, you're going up higher till the end where it climaxes, and then you're on the thrill ride down. It is really a well-done movie.
Yeah, it really is. And, you got to give credit to Christopher Nolan, not only for the direction, but for, his writing. If you don't have a good script, it doesn't matter how many effects you put in a movie, how many great performances, you got to have the story. And that's what I think makes this movie hold up so well.
And the nuanced performances from everybody.
Oh, yeah.
I know we'll probably talk about this later, but one of my favorite scenes, this is so fresh in my mind, Jason, from watching it last night. One of my favorite scenes in this movie is Reese, the accountant, who decides to hold the meeting with Morgan Freeman,
right?
Lucius Fox, and he pulls out the blueprints for the Batmobile and says, did you recognize this? And da-da-da. I found some discrepancies in the accounting. I want $10 million a year every year for the rest of my life.
Right.
And Lucius Fox says, wait, so you think the owner of this company is a man who dresses up and beats the pulp out of bad guys every night, and your plan is to blackmail him?
Yeah. That is a great scene.
It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, that shuts him up pretty quick.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool, too, because, everybody recognizes Morgan Freeman as this great actor, obviously, and he is. But he has a very small role in this movie, but it's impactful, and he's great.
Well, he's the voice of reason as well. The scene in the end when they're using all the cell phones for sonar, this is almost a precursor to the NSA listening to all of our cell phone devices. And he's saying, I can't be a party to this. This is not something that we can do.
Yeah, it's unethical.
Yeah, he destroys it in the end, which is sort of a message to the NSA. And I think this happened before the whole NSA thing. So that was, like I said, it's precursor.
Yep. I don't want to gloss over Heath Ledger completely. I mean, I know we've already sung his praises, but there's a lot of stuff I want to talk about. In preparing for the role as the Joker, he stayed alone in a motel room for about 6 weeks. He devoted himself to developing the Joker's every tick, as you mentioned, which you said, like you said, is very nuanced. There's,
Yes.
all kinds of stuff to look for, namely the voice and the laugh. He really went out of his way to do something that was very different from what Jack Nicholson did with the role. You got to make the role your own. So I think he did a great job of doing that. And they said that his interpretation of the Joker's appearance was sort of based on a couple of different people. Sid Vicious from the Sex Pistols, combined with the psychotic mannerisms of Malcolm McDowell's character, Alex from A Clockwork Orange. And Sir Michael Caine, who himself is an Oscar winner and, of course, a very renowned actor. He feels that Heath Ledger's performance is better than Jack Nicholson, mainly because he kind of saw Jack Nicholson as like a clown figure, like maybe a killer old uncle, as opposed to like a really psychotic guy like Heath plays it. He just felt like people were really going to be blown away by Heath's performance, and obviously they were.
Well, and at one point, he was blown away by Heath's performance in the scene in the penthouse where he's terrorizing the rich people, the Joker.
Yeah.
Michael Caine forgot his lines because Heath Ledger was so terrorizing.
Yeah. And that's saying something, because he's a pro. I mean, he's in everything,
That's right. Yeah. I read, too, that he did his own makeup. He said, well, of course, he would do his own makeup because he's the Joker, and he'd just buy it off the shelf and put it on, and that's the craziness of it all.
And that's the thing about the Joker's makeup. He's clearly just throwing something on his face. There's anarchy in his makeup, even.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the word that Christopher Nolan had for the movie, chaos.
Yeah.
He's got chaos written all over his face.
Literally, yeah. And I love how he keeps changing the story of how he got the scars and stuff, too.
And they don't go into that, which I think is great because it leaves him this enigma in the movie that, you just can't put your finger on it. You're going, why is he telling different stories? What's the backstory? And I'm glad that we don't know because it leaves it up to a mystery.
Yeah, and I think part of it is probably because he wants to keep people guessing, but maybe he doesn't even know. It's just, he's that crazy.
Yeah. I read that Barack Obama used the scene, the scene where the Joker is in with all of the mob guys, mm-hmm. and he's talking about burning the place to the ground. And Barack Obama used that scene as a presentation to say the Joker is ISIS.
Yeah.
And that's pretty big deal when you trying to get a point across and you're using a comic book film, if you will.
Absolutely.
And it effectively does the job. Way to go, Barack Obama.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Alfred, Michael Caine's character, tells that story about the guy who was robbing robbing all the jewels, and he didn't even care about the money or the jewels. He just wanted to watch the world burn. And that certainly seems like what ISIS is all about, and clearly what the Joker is about in this movie, too. There was all kinds of rumors, too, about Heath Ledger's death being caused by him taking on this role. It was such an intense performance and an intense getting into character that it made him depressed and everything else. His family has squashed those rumors. They said he actually really enjoyed playing the role. Obviously, there was a lot of preparation that went into it, and you really have to go to a very dark place to play this character the way he did. The reality is that Heath Ledger was a really bad insomniac, and he used to take sleeping pills and other medications to try and sleep better. Unfortunately, the night that he passed away was because he took too many of the wrong things together, and his sister, had warned him about being careful about that.
That's why you got to ask the doctor, can I take this with that? Because it might have some serious side effect, and that's exactly what happened to Heath Ledger, unfortunately.
Yeah. The licking of the lips was a thing that you mentioned earlier as one of the tics that he does. One of the things they talked about in the special was that he did that because the prosthetic that made up the scars on his face would come undone without that. So he actually incorporated the licking of the lips to keep, so it would help the scar on his face to not come undone and have to be reapplied.
Needed the moisture, apparently.
Yes.
This movie won an Academy Award for sound editing, and one of the things that the sound that really stands out to me, and I think this has to do with being in radio and listening to audio really intently, but it's his lip smacking, because mm-hmm. he was such a lip smacker in mm-hmm. this movie too,
Yeah.
And he would do that all the time. And while one might find it annoying, in his character, it was just one of those tics that you went, oh, he's one of those guys.
Yeah.
Guys, that was great.
It actually adds to the character. Because, like you said, it is something that is probably annoying to more people than not, let's face it. And like you said, it's so prominent in the audio soundtrack, it's disturbing. And he's got those yellow teeth, and he's like, oh, man. Oh.
Now, I'm not sure. Did you hear that Heath Ledger was a method actor, or was he just into his role? I mean, there are some characters that get into their role, like the guy who won the Oscar for Lincoln.
Daniel Day-Lewis, yeah.
Daniel Day-Lewis becomes that character for the entire shooting of the film. So, like, he was Abe Lincoln for 6 months or whatever it was. And he does that with every film that he does.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if Heath Ledger was that way or if he was just taking on the character and got himself sequestered away for 6 weeks while he built the character in his mind.
Yeah, I don't think he was his method. I think that, like you said, he prepared immensely for the role. I think it was sort of a muscle memory thing. He did all that preparation ahead of time. And then when he was on set, obviously he could dial into that and lock himself in. I remember reading something about one of the scenes that he did with Harvey Dent, where he got really fired up before the camera started rolling. He was like talking to himself as the Joker and doing, kind of getting into it. And then they did a take. And then right after the take, he said to him, "Now that's acting," or something like that. There you go. That's how you do a scene or something like that, out of character. So obviously, he wasn't walking around going, "Call me Joker." Daniel Day-Lewis literally was walking around expecting people to address him as Abraham Lincoln on that.
One of my favorite scenes in this movie, though, is when he's blowing up the hospital.
Oh, it's terrific.
He comes out of the hospital and he starts beating the crap out of that detonating device.
Which was not supposed to happen. I read that it didn't go off the way it was supposed to or something, and him beating it was an ad lib. And then, of course, the explosion goes off, and then he reacts.
Right, and he runs off.
Yeah.
That's a great piece. It turns a very serious moment of this hospital being destroyed into a little bit of levity.
I love everything about that scene is great. The way he looks in that nurse outfit with the wig, the way he walks. It's so good, and it's funny and disturbing all at the same time. And one of the things that I think is cool is that his name tag reads Matilda, his daughter's name. So it was a little shout out to her, which I think is cool. When they were filming the chase scene with the Joker and the SWAT vans, one of only 4 IMAX cameras in the world was destroyed during that, which has got to be a bummer if you're making the movie.
It's a huge bummer because it costs $500,000 to replace that IMAX camera.
Yeah.
Hey, and here's an interesting bit of trivia. They destroyed another IMAX camera in the next Batman movie.
No. Wow.
Yeah, Catwoman on the motorcycle, on the Bat Pod.
Oh, no.
They wrecked one there, too.
Unbelievable that could happen twice.
Expensive movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think one of the great things about this movie are the practical effects, as opposed to the CGI stuff, which you get in almost everything today. There were definitely some CGI moments, but really it was the practical effects that made this movie seem more realistic to me, more believable.
Oh, absolutely. Harvey Dent's burnt face was all done with CGI. And even though you're praising the practical effects as opposed to a lot of the CGI, that's one case where I think the CGI is a better thing. And the reason for that, and I think it's actually kind of a cool thing, Christopher Nolan didn't want to use prosthetics for that because no matter how good they might have been, it's still adding something to an actor's face that's supposed to be missing.
Yeah.
That stuff is amazing. I mean, his face when it's all burnt off.
In that case, the CGI is great because they could take the muscles and the tongue and you could see everything moving inside there.
Yeah.
And there's this great scene where he takes the shot glass off the bar and drinks it and it pours out the side of his mouth where he doesn't have a mouth anymore.
Yeah.
That was great.
The only thing that I think is a little weird about that is that if your face was really mangled like that, would you be able to talk as well?
Yeah, probably not.
The interesting thing about this movie with all the explosions and, whatever fighting and everything else, there's not a lot of blood. Blood is on screen 3 times.
Yeah, one time is on the pillow after Harvey Dent burns his face.
Mm-hmm. Batman's arm after the dog attacks him. And then the civilian Batman that the Joker hangs is on his face. So most of the violence is either off screen or, different camera angles and things like that. So Bruce Wayne's penthouse was actually shot on the ground floor of an office building, which I think is kind of interesting, in downtown Chicago. During the daytime, the same space was reused for Harvey Dent's press conference scenes. There you go, getting the most bang for your buck, right?
Well, speaking of banging, the opening sequence where that school bus backs into the bank and hits one of the henchmen, they actually had to do that inside, so they cut the bus in half, and then they put up a fake wall, and then they pushed the bus through the fake wall with an air hammer so that they could get the practical scene of the school bus coming in. It was an old post office they were shooting in.
That's cool. A lot of times when they make a big movie like this, they usually have a fake name for it so they don't attract paparazzi and other undesirables to the set.
Right.
So when production began on this movie, Rory's First Kiss was the title that they used to
Until the
prevent onlookers and
Batmobile
trespassers.
shows up. Until the Batmobile shows
Right.
up, and then all bets are off.
But I think it's funny they named it after Christopher Nolan's son, which is kind of cool. Another cool fact about the soundtrack, we don't talk about scoring nearly enough on the podcast, except for the real obvious ones. Like when I did the podcast for Jaws, of course, we talked about it then, because the score for Jaws is what makes you believe in a gigantic shark before you ever see the shark. I mean, it's amazing. But it's often sort of overlooked, how important scoring is and how it really sets the tone of the movie. But this movie is one of only 5 films whose purely orchestral soundtracks won the Grammy Award for Best Score, despite not being nominated for an Academy Award for Best Original Score. The other 4 films, 1959's Anatomy of a Murder, 1989's Glory, Crimson Tide from 1995, and the 1996 film Independence Day. And that was definitely mentioned on the Independence Day podcast as well, but it's definitely worth mentioning again that it's pretty amazing when you think about it. It's something that's Grammy-worthy, but the Oscars completely overlook. When we think of scoring, obviously you can't help but think of John Williams and all the great scores he's done for the Star Wars movies, Superman, E.T., Indiana Jones, all those, and Jaws, like I mentioned.
Yeah,
but,
Hans Zimmer is making a name for himself as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys. Danny Elfman, too. I mean, And I just read about there's a new movie called Score. It's a documentary about these guys that create these amazing soundtracks that I want to see.
That music is like a direct connection to your emotion, which I think is just a piece of movie magic. But you and I are both audio guys, and I think that audio is so important. I mean, if you've ever shot a video on your iPhone and you go, oh my gosh, that sounds horrible. If you could just lay in some real audio underneath it, it sounds fantastic. Audio is important.
Yeah, I mean, would we feel the same emotions of Rocky running up those steps without Gonna Fly now?
Absolutely not. Direct connection to your emotion.
Yeah. The Dark Knight trilogy is one of 3 trilogies to be charted in the IMDb top 250 movies. The others, the original Star Wars trilogy and the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Well, there's definitely an impact with Batman movies. There's no question about it.
I think the reason that Batman succeeds so much with us as people is because he's not a superhero. He doesn't have superpowers.
That's right. He's a normal guy.
He's a normal guy with a lot of cool gadgets and a will, to make a difference.
Really good bank account.
Yeah, but listen, and all that stuff I think in the movie is very cool with him asking Lucius to give him a different suit so he could turn his head and everything else and protect him against the dog bites. And then the Joker sicks the dogs on him, and it looks like he is protected. So it's kind of cool. They kind of do a callback to that original thing in the beginning.
Well, they did a good job, too, I think, in that particular dog fight scene, because there are 3 Rottweilers that attack him. Mm-hmm. But they did a good job of not hurting the dogs.
Yes.
So instead of killing the dogs, he throws them off into a net, which I thought was great because, the animal people would be going crazy over that.
I don't know what it is about movies. Anytime a dog gets hurt, I don't want to see it. I didn't watch John Wick because I heard a puppy gets killed.
It's true.
Yeah, and they show it, right?
Yeah.
See, I can't watch that. I understand if Batman is being attacked by Rottweilers, he's going to obviously defend himself. But you're right. They don't show anything graphic. They don't show him kill the dogs or anything like that. They just show him kind of get tossed aside.
They're tossed into a net, and I think they end up on the lower floor.
The Dark Knight, almost 10 years old, still as fresh and as great as it was the first time I saw it personally. And I could go on and on about how much I love Heath Ledger in this movie. And it always makes me sad when somebody with so much potential and who is so brilliant, and obviously he's done other movies where he was just as brilliant, it just makes me sad that he's gone,
Yep.
Because who knows where his career would have gone from here.
Though, there is something to dying young in Hollywood because we don't have to watch them age. We don't have to watch them suffer. We don't have to watch them do terrible movies. There's something to it. They live on forever in the state as we remember them.
Better to burn out than fade away.
Amen.
Well, Les, thanks so much for taking the time. I always appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks to you for listening. Please remember to like the Facebook page, facebook.com/screenfacts. Let us know if you have a favorite scene from the movie that we didn't talk about. If you have any other comments, you can post on Facebook or you can email screenfacts@yahoo.com. Again, you can follow me on Twitter @JasonDavisVoice. Les, where can people find you on social media?
I'm everywhere at Les Sinclair.
Okay. If you're listening with iTunes, please leave a review. Show theme music by Audionautics.com. And thanks to our announcer, Kim McKay from kimsvoice.com.
Yay, Kim.
Screen Facts with Jason Davis is a production of Jason Davis VoiceOver. Visit jasondavisvoice.com if you need a voice for a commercial, narration, promo, internet video, e-learning or training program, and more. Click on the podcast page to get information about where you can download and listen to past episodes. Listen again next Wednesday for a new episode of Screen Facts with Jason Davis.